Your knowledge of contract language is imperative.
You must know what a violation looks like if you wish to be active in its cessation.
It is important to understand that being active and knowledgeable affects your overall bargaining strength.
Together, we can forge a more militant NALC.
Good morning, letter carriers, and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, that podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier, with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. Don't forget, last chance to submit questions to NALC presidential candidates James Henry and Mike Cariff is September 1st. We are halfway through asking for questions. I started in the beginning of August and gave you till September 1st. Only roughly 2 weeks are left. If you have something to ask either candidate, please submit questions to the Parcels of Knowledge Facebook or to the email. They don't have to be, they're going to be anonymous, so don't worry about putting your name out there. Whether or not you submit them anonymously, I'll be asking them anonymously. Or you can submit them to my email, rosevillewreckingball@yahoo.com. Now today, I'll be doing a basic breakdown of Articles 15, 17, and 31 and how they act together as the essentials of stewardship. And for those carriers who wonder how it works, I'll be breaking down the basics. This will be followed by my episode next week on how to balance a large caseload, my grievance tracking system, and how I stay efficient when filing grievances. Additionally, I'm working on something exciting when it comes to undelivered mail, but I'm going to keep that a little bit more under wraps for now and let you know when something happens. Now to begin with, Article 17, Section 1 allows for the designation of stewards for the purpose of investigating, presenting, and adjusting grievances. Article 17.2 covers how many stewards can be designated. It's a simple formula in which you can determine number of stewards based on employees in the same craft per tour or station. If there is up to 49, it calls for 1 steward. From 50 to 99 is 2. From 100 to 199 is 3. Then from 200 to 499, you get 5 stewards. And if you have more than 500 carriers, you can have an additional steward for each 100 carriers. This designation typically comes in the form of a certification from the branch president. What do we do prior to being certified? Absolutely nothing. That is the worst way to lose a case because certification is so simple. Never begin a case as a steward prior to receiving the proper certification for that installation. Without certification, you have no rights to process that grievance. So it's best not to touch it yet. That way you don't complicate things later on down the line when we question for arbitrability. Article 17, Sections 3 and 4 establish several steward rights, such as the right to investigate and adjust grievances and problems that may become grievances, the right to paid time to conduct those activities, the right to obtain management information, superseniority concerning being involuntarily transferred, and an employee's right to steward representation. Additionally, settlements and arbitration awards have expanded on these rights. I would like to talk about these. For example, M1001 and M164 talks about the right to interview witnesses, including postal patrons. M988 talks about interviewing supervisors and how they must participate and answer reasonable and germane questions. M225, which establishes that a steward may not be unreasonably denied the ability to interview a postal inspector or RIG. C427, which talks about how management may not determine in advance how much time a steward reasonably needs to investigate a grievance. M857 covers the fact that a steward may not be denied time to discuss a grievance solely because they are in an overtime status. M332 established that it is both the union and management to decide mutually when the steward will be allowed, subject to business conditions, an opportunity to investigate and adjust grievances. That is, management must work with you to work within your schedule as well. M127 talks about how if management must delay a steward from investigating a grievance, they should inform the steward of the reasons for the delay and when time will be available. That one gets missed at my station a lot. I file for that one routinely. M303 talks about an employee must be given reasonable time to consult with their steward, and such reasonable time may not be measured by a predetermined factor. That part's important. Make sure they don't tell you, oh, you can only talk for 5 minutes, unless they tell you they're going to schedule more later on. And M458, which asserted that in most cases, a grievant and a steward should be able to discuss the grievance without delay, but 95% of the time with no more than a 2-hour delay. While circumstances will sometimes necessitate a delay of more than 2 hours, normally the delay should not extend beyond the 2 hour of duty in which the request is made. Just remember, many of these things can be found in the MRS, almost all of them. And you can go to the NALC website, find the MRS section, that's like a directory of M documents, and type in the numbers I was talking about, and you'll be able to be directed straight to the document. Now that we have that out of the way, let's ask, what is a grievance? Article 15.1 of the National Agreement defines the grievance. It says that it is a dispute, difference, disagreement, or complaint between the parties related to wages, hours, and conditions of employment, otherwise known as working conditions. A grievance shall include, but is not limited to, the complaint of an employee or the union, which involves an interpretation, application of, or compliance with the provisions of the National Agreement or any local memorandum of understanding not in conflict with the National Agreement. Essentially, it covers issues involving the National Agreement, issues involving LMOUs, alleged violations of postal handbooks or manuals, alleged violations of other enforceable agreements such as the JSOV, Joint Statement on Violence, disputes concerning rights of ill or injured employees, and alleged violations of the law. There are 2 types of traditional grievances stewards file, and that is contract cases, which are typically violations of the National Agreement, or discipline cases, which are cases where a carrier got issued discipline, but we're trying to get it either removed or reduced. The first step of the grievance procedure, outside of determining a grievance, is informal A. It is the step where the union initiates a grievance within 14 days of the incident. The 14-day limit begins the day after the occurrence or the day after the grievant or union would have been reasonably made aware of the violation. If that such grievance isn't resolved, it may be appealed to Formal A, in which the Formal A designees will meet and discuss the grievance. If it's not resolved at Formal A, the parties may appeal the case and it will be had at Step B. If Step B cannot resolve the grievance, it will be impassed for arbitration. Remember, throughout this whole process, the union is the moving party of the case file. This means that after all information is discussed at each step, they are the deciding factor as to when or if a case will be appealed to the next step. In any such step, the supervisor or designees shall have the authority to resolve the grievance. Both parties must use the National Agreement as their guide, and while either party may consult with higher levels on an issue or dispute, the parties to the initial discussion of a grievance retain independent authority to settle the dispute. if a resolve is reached, please remember to get the resolution in writing. It must have both parties' signature on it and a date. Preferably, it should have other factors such as an issue statement, full remedy, a sunset clause for that remedy, an incident date, and the names of the parties signing the agreement for starters. Typically, I would only deal with lump sums. While I would put hours on my settlements, I would always calculate the lump sums anyway because it's easier for carriers to track whether or not they got paid. Because in the beginning, they were coming up to me saying, hey, did I get paid 10 hours? And I didn't have a figure for what 10 hours meant. So I started doing it straight from the start so that I can review their pay stub to determine exactly whether or not they were paid the correct adjustment. As a new steward, it could be especially confusing as to where to start because this process you have not experienced yet. I guarantee that if you're diligent, you'll be successful in no time. First, a steward must be certified by their branch president, as I have stated before. Do not do anything if you're not certified. If certified, the first step is to request steward time, preferably in writing so that you can prove that you did so. On that steward time request, and during that steward time, you are tasked with gathering facts. If you say something in the case file or in the discussions, you must back it up with proof in the case file. You cannot say someone was improperly mandated without proving it, because in contract cases, the union has the burden of proof, and in discipline cases, management has the burden of proof. But in either case, we don't want to say anything without proving it. For example, for improper mandation, you must also include clock rings, which you must also request through information requests. If you are ever stuck on whether or not something is a grievance, you should confide with a support group and seek advice. I have a steady group of individuals I consider intelligent and trustworthy on matters relevant to the union, and I will always call on them when I'm doing something unfamiliar. I personally think it's the best way. I don't think you should be too confident with what you got going on. Always bounce your ideas off. It's always good to seek good ideas and to seek advice. Just remember, this is your investigation, stewards. You must build your case file and prove your point by pointing to the proof. Also, keep in mind, it's always very important to show the harm, especially with our lame system of people deciding things above us. Sometimes you must work within your constraints if you wish to be successful. A contractual violation should be harm enough on its own just to prove that they violated the terms of the agreement. But for some reason, Steppian arbitrators are more likely to issue a more favorable decision when there is harm to the carrier and that harm is articulated well in the case file. Examples of harm are loss of wages, loss of health, loss of benefit, and loss of opportunities. Essentially, one of the harms that can be proven very easily is entitlements. For example, if there's a pecking order to overtime and that pecking order was violated, that proves that the ODL was entitled to that violation. That in itself is a harm that is financial and can be proven. Stewards and carriers are also given important rights and responsibilities via the National Labor Relations Act and other federal laws. One federal law that is most commonly known is the Weingarten Rule, which gives each employee the right to representation during any investigatory interview which he or she reasonably believes that may lead to discipline. Just remember, the steward cannot exercise the rights on the employee's behalf. They must ask to invoke their own Weingarten rights themselves. Additionally, it's recommended that if you're being declined these rights, you respectfully tell them that you cannot continue the conversation without your steward. If management badgers you about answering their questions, continue to respond with, "I'd love to answer, but I need my steward present in accordance with my wine garden rights." You never want to give them anything to work with, like failure to follow instructions for simply refusing to talk. As pathetic as it sounds, it's the truth. Also, keep in mind, the employer doesn't have to inform the employee of their right to representation via the wine garden rights. Wine garden rights apply when there's an investigation or the employee reasonably believes that the conversation could lead to discipline. It does not apply to Article 16.2 official discussions, fitness for duty examinations, nor when a carrier is being issued discipline. And I'm talking about the actual paper discipline when they're just giving it to you. Any type of investigation, full send, but not, you don't have those same rights when you're being issued a paper discipline. And this brings us to our final article of the contract of the day, Article 31. Article 31 provides that the Postal Service will make available to the union all relevant information necessary for collective bargaining or the enforcement, administration, or interpretation of the agreement, including information necessary to determine whether to file or continue the processing of a grievance. It also recognizes the union's legal right to the employer information under the National Labor Relations Act. If you keep filing grievances for not getting information, you should consider filing a labor charge. As of recently, we were tied into another person's labor charge in the area because our area is bad at providing information, and it gave us a favorable consent order in which the people here would have to pay $17,000 per violation if they violated. That type of thing is very useful when it comes to making sure that management has an incentive to follow the contract. Examples of information a steward would be entitled to, if they're relevant to their case file, are attendance records, payroll records, documents in an employee's official personnel file, internal USPS instructions and memorandums, disciplinary records, route inspection records, customer complaints, handbooks and manuals, photographs, reports and studies, seniority lists, overtime desired and work assignment lists, bidding records, wage and salary records, training manuals, Postal Inspection Service investigative memoranda, and Office of Inspector General reports of investigation. Additionally, stewards can request your medical information even without your consent, so long as it's relevant to the case that they're working on. For example, if you have a restriction and there's an Article 8 violation, if you didn't have that restriction, the union has the ability to request that information to see if there was a grievance that exists. But one lesser known fact is that we have the right to ask for information in a particular format if possible. In accordance with Handbook AS 353, Section 4, the service will not deny an information request in the requester's requested format if feasible. This is important because the service is allowed to charge us for each page of duplication beyond 100 pages per case file. Additionally, one reason why I ask for employee everything reports in PDF format is Adobe Acrobat makes searching those things so simple, as long as you know what you're looking for. By searching key terms such as 1017 within the document, I once was able to go through 1,000 pages of everything reports for falsification and pinpoint the few times that I was looking for that I knew that the falsification existed. It only took minutes to do that, with over 1,000 pages. That's why this is an important thing to stay efficient with your grievance processing. So if you want your information in a certain form so that it may help you be efficient or avoid costs, you have the right to do so. And remember, that's under the Handbook AS 353, Section 4, which can be incorporated into our national agreement via Article 19. Now, so all together, I know this was a very basic podcast today, but all together, Article 15, 17, and 31s are the articles of the national agreement which governs steward duties, the grievance procedure, and rights of both stewards and carriers in regards to their union representation. Go out there and read those M documents I pointed out if you don't already know them. Carriers, I hope I cleared the air a little bit on how things work. I know sometimes it can be frustrating when you have a issue and you're just sitting there waiting. The grievance procedure definitely is a long process, especially if there's extensions built in. As, for example, I'm a perfect example. I do way too many extensions because my caseload is too big. But hopefully I made you understand the process a little bit more, and you can come to your stewards and ask them to be more transparent with where it is in the process, now that you know what the process is. And new stewards, if you study all three of those articles, I assure that you can be a professional in no time at all. Study, study, study. Read that contract as much as you can. That's the best advice you can ever be given. Now, before I let you guys go, don't forget, we got to get those questions for the presidential Q&As. We're in the final stretch, so if you have any burning questions for either candidate, please submit them to me at the Parcels of Knowledge Facebook or to my email, RosevalleWreckingBall@yahoo.com. I'm going to also put this information in the episode description. I hope you learned something valuable today, and as always, have a good day.
Brothers and sisters, this guy is good, man. He's fucking good.
And my boy Joshua, he killed it. Man, he's lockstep right now. He's killing it.
You would think this guy has been around for 30 fucking